My name is Claire Kensington, and I am 34 years old. The moment the federal agents walked into my brother's wedding reception, I knew my family's life was over. The music stopped mid-song. A champagne glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the floor. 300 guests turned toward the ballroom entrance at the same time. My father stood so suddenly his chair fell backward. My mother looked like she couldn't breathe. And my brother, Grant, who had been smiling seconds earlier beside his new bride, looked completely confused. Then an agent stepped forward and pulled out a badge. "Richard Kensington, you're under arrest." The room exploded. People started whispering. Others pulled out their phones. Reporters rushed toward the stage. My mother burst into tears. Then my brother pointed directly at me. "You did this." His voice echoed through the ballroom. Every head turned toward me. Standing beside me was the same Carpenter my family had spent years calling a gold digger. The same man they falsely accused. The same man they tried to erase from my life. What nobody in that room knew was that this story didn't begin at a wedding. It began years earlier behind a wall inside an abandoned office building. And the secret hidden there was finally destroying the man who had spent years destroying everyone else. Before I tell you how everything happened, welcome to her revenge stories. Do me a favor. If this story resonates with you, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, what time is it where you're watching from? 10 years before the wedding disaster, my life looked almost perfect. I grew up in Oak Ridge, Illinois, in a family that seemed to have everything. My father, Richard Kensington, owned Kensington Development Group, one of the largest construction companies in the state. His projects were everywhere. Office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes. If you drove through Oak Ridge, chances were you'd eventually see a building with our family name attached to it. My mother, Evelyn Kensington, came from one of the most respected families in the region. People knew her from charity events, fundraising galas, and community boards. Everywhere we went, someone seemed to know my parents. Growing up, I never worried about money. Grant and I attended the best private schools. We wore expensive uniforms. Took vacations to places most kids only saw in magazines. Had tutors, opportunities, and connections. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. And honestly, for a long time, I believed we were. My brother Grant was 3 years older than me. He was confident, ambitious, and already preparing to take over my father's company one day. People admired him. Teachers loved him. Business associates treated him like the future king of Oak Ridge. Meanwhile, I was usually the quieter one. Not ignored exactly. Just less important. Grant was the heir. I was simply Richard Kensington's daughter. Still, I loved my family. Or at least I thought I did. Everything started changing the afternoon I met Owen Fletcher. I had stopped by my father's corporate headquarters to drop off some documents he needed for an upcoming board meeting. The executive floor was undergoing repairs after a pipe burst several weeks earlier. Construction workers were everywhere. Dust covered parts of the hallway. Temporary barriers blocked several offices. I remember being annoyed because the elevators were crowded and the entire place smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. As I walked toward my father's office, I wasn't paying attention. My phone slipped from my hand. Before it hit the floor, someone caught it. That would have been expensive. I looked up. Standing in front of me was a man wearing work boots, jeans, and a tool belt. He smiled and handed my phone back. That was Owen. At first, it was nothing. A short conversation. A thank you. Then I left. But over the next few weeks, I kept running into him. Sometimes in the lobby. Sometimes near the parking lot. Sometimes while visiting my father. Each conversation became slightly longer than the last. What surprised me wasn't that Owen was attractive. Though he was. It was how normal he treated me. Most people acted differently once they learned who my father was. They became careful. Polite. Sometimes fake. Owen didn't. He teased me when I deserved it. Disagreed with me when he thought I was wrong. And somehow that felt refreshing. One afternoon we ended up sharing coffee from a vending machine because the cafe downstairs had closed early. Another day we sat outside during his lunch break talking about everything from baseball to childhood dreams. Before I realized it, I started looking forward to seeing him. Then one evening he asked if I'd like to have dinner sometime. A real dinner. Not a fancy event. Not a business function. Just dinner. I remember saying yes before he even finished the question. And from that moment, everything changed. Dinner became more dinners. Phone calls became nightly conversations. Soon we were spending every free moment together. For the first time in my life, I felt something I had never truly experienced before. When Owen looked at me, he didn't see the Kensington name. He didn't see my father's company. He didn't see privilege. He saw me. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I fell completely in love. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if things would have turned out differently if Grant had never walked into that restaurant. Maybe my family would have had more time to know Owen. Maybe I would have been able to prepare them. Or maybe everything was destined to fall apart anyway. For almost a year, Owen and I kept our relationship private. Not because I was ashamed of him. Far from it. I was proud of him. I simply knew my parents. I knew the questions they would ask. Where did he go to school? How much money did he make? What kind of future could he provide? Those questions had never mattered to me. But they mattered to my family. Especially my mother. So we kept things between us. We went on quiet dates. Small restaurants. Movie nights. Long drives through the countryside outside Oak Ridge. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that would attract attention. Honestly, those were some of the happiest months of my life. Then one Thursday evening, everything changed. Owen and I were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. It wasn't fancy. Red checkered tablecloths. Family photos hanging on the walls. The kind of place where the owner knew half the customers by name. We were halfway through our meal when I noticed someone entering through the front door. My stomach immediately dropped. Grant. He was there to pick up a takeout order. For a second, I hoped he wouldn't notice us. Then our eyes met. I knew instantly that hope was gone. Grant stopped walking. His expression changed. Slowly. Noticeably. Then he marched directly toward our table. I remember feeling every eye in the restaurant turn toward us. Claire. His voice was sharp. I forced a smile. Hey. His eyes shifted toward Owen. Then back to me. Then back to Owen. A carpenter. The word came out louder than it needed to. Several nearby customers looked over. I felt heat rush into my face. Grant, please. But he wasn't listening. You've been hiding this. Owen remained calm. He stood up and extended his hand. Nice to meet you. Grant stared at the hand but didn't shake it. The tension was immediate. Uncomfortable. Embarrassing. And honestly, painful. Because I could already see what was happening. Grant wasn't seeing Owen. He was seeing his job title. Nothing else. I quickly pulled my brother aside. Please don't tell Mom and Dad. He looked genuinely frustrated. Claire, what are you doing? I'm happy. That's not the point. Then what is the point? He lowered his voice. You don't know his intentions. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've known him for 30 seconds. Grant sighed heavily. I'm trying to protect you. At the time, I thought he was being arrogant. Years later, I would realize he genuinely believed he was helping. But that night, all I felt was anger. When he finally left, my appetite was gone. The rest of dinner felt different. Like a storm had appeared on the horizon. Neither of us said much. And deep down, I think both of us knew what was coming. The next morning confirmed it. I woke up to 6 missed calls from my mother. 3 text messages from my father. And 1 message from Grant. We need to talk. The moment I walked into my parents' house that evening, I knew the situation was bad. My mother was pacing the living room. My father sat silently in his chair. Neither looked happy. What were you thinking? My mother demanded before I even sat down. The interrogation started immediately. Questions. Accusations. Assumptions. My mother was furious. To her, I was throwing away every opportunity they had worked to give me. But surprisingly, my father remained calm. At least at first. Then he said something that gave me hope. Bring him here. I blinked. What? I want to meet him. For the first time all evening, I felt relieved. Maybe this wasn't a disaster. Maybe if they got to know Owen, they would understand. Maybe they would see the man I had fallen in love with. I remember leaving that conversation feeling hopeful. What I didn't know was that my father had already started asking questions about Owen. And the answers he was about to find would change all of our lives forever. The night Owen came to meet my parents felt like one of the biggest moments of my life. I spent almost an hour helping him choose a shirt. Not because he needed help. Because I was nervous. Really nervous. I wanted everything to go well. I wanted my parents to see what I saw every time I looked at him. A hard-working man. An honest man. A good man. When Owen arrived at the Kensington house that evening, he looked handsome. Simple. But handsome. He carried himself with quiet confidence. Not the kind that comes from money. The kind that comes from knowing who you are. My mother greeted him politely, though her smile felt forced. My father shook his hand. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then something happened. Something I didn't fully understand until years later. While Owen and my father were talking, my father suddenly became quiet. Very quiet. His eyes remained fixed on Owen longer than normal. Almost as if he was trying to remember something. I noticed it. Even Owen seemed to notice it. Then dinner started. At first, the conversation was harmless. Questions about work. Questions about family. Questions about future plans. Owen answered every single one respectfully. My father was a mechanic. Mom works at a nursing home. I've been doing carpentry for almost 8 years. Simple answers. Honest answers. Then my father's questions changed. Abruptly. How many construction sites have you worked on? Owen looked confused. A lot. Name them. The table fell silent. Even my mother looked surprised. Owen politely listed several projects. My father listened carefully. Too carefully. Then came another question. Have you ever worked for Kensington Development? I frowned. That seemed oddly specific. Owen nodded. A few years ago. Something changed in my father's face. It happened so quickly that I almost missed it. His expression froze. Not anger. Not disappointment. Something closer to panic. For the rest of dinner, his mood deteriorated. The conversation became uncomfortable. Every answer Owen gave seemed to irritate him. Every comment became another excuse for criticism. By the time dessert arrived, I could feel tension filling the room. The evening ended shortly afterward. Outside, Owen tried reassuring me. "It's okay." "No, it's not." He smiled softly. "I'll be fine." But he didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. The moment he left, everything exploded. My father stood from his chair. "Absolutely not." I stared at him. "What?" "This relationship ends." My heart sank. "Dad." "No." His voice echoed through the room. "He's not good enough for you." I expected concerns about money. About status. About social standing. Instead, he seemed unusually angry. Personally angry. Almost offended. I couldn't understand it. For days, arguments filled the house. Every conversation turned into a fight. My mother focused on reputation. Grant focused on protecting me. But my father seemed obsessed. And I didn't know why. What I didn't know was that while I was arguing with my family, my father had already hired a private investigator. He wanted answers. Fast. Within a week, the investigator delivered them. Years earlier, before Owen and I ever met, he had worked on a renovation project inside one of Kensington Development's abandoned office buildings. Most people would have forgotten that detail. But Richard Kensington didn't. The moment he read the report, he remembered. Exactly. Because during that renovation, Owen had discovered something hidden behind a wall. A concealed compartment. And inside it were documents that should never have existed. Financial records. Invoices. Account numbers. Evidence. Evidence Richard had spent years making sure nobody found. Suddenly, everything made sense. The face. The name. The memories. Owen wasn't just a carpenter dating his daughter. He was the one person who unknowingly held the key to destroying everything Richard had built. From that day forward, my father stopped seeing Owen as a boyfriend. He started seeing him as a threat. And once Richard Kensington viewed someone as a threat, he would do almost anything to eliminate them. Unfortunately, Owen had no idea how dangerous the situation had just become. And neither did I. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning. I was at work when a wave of dizziness hit me so suddenly that I had to grab the edge of my desk. For weeks, I had been feeling exhausted. Not normal tiredness. The kind of exhaustion that follows you everywhere. I struggled to get out of bed. Food tasted strange. And I constantly felt sick. At first, I blamed stress. There was plenty of it. My family was still fighting me over Owen. Every dinner conversation ended in arguments. Every phone call became a lecture. I told myself the tension was simply catching up with me. I was wrong. A few days later, my mother insisted on taking me to see a doctor. I remember sitting in that examination room staring at a poster on the wall while waiting for the results. The doctor entered carrying a file. She smiled. "Congratulations." My stomach dropped. I already knew. Somehow, I knew before she said it. "You're pregnant." The room became silent. My mother stopped breathing for a second. I sat frozen. Pregnant. The word echoed in my head. Part of me felt terrified. Part of me felt excited. And another part of me immediately thought about Owen. Then I looked at my mother. The excitement vanished. Because her expression told me exactly what was coming. The drive home was unbearable. Nobody spoke. Not once. My mother stared out the window. I stared at my hands. When we arrived home, my father was waiting. The second he saw our faces, he knew something was wrong. What happened? My mother answered. And everything exploded. What? The word echoed through the living room. I had seen my father angry before. But never like this. Never. His face turned red. His breathing changed. He began pacing. Then came the questions. How far along are you? Does Owen know? When were you planning on telling us? I tried answering. He wasn't listening. Not really. Then he asked the question we both already knew the answer to. He's the father. I nodded. That was it. Something inside him snapped. He stormed out of the room. My mother followed him. Grant arrived later that evening. By then the entire house felt like a war zone. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody asked how I felt. Nobody asked if I was scared. Everything became about embarrassment. Reputation. Damage. The family name. Meanwhile, all I could think about was my baby. And Owen. The next morning I called him. He sounded shocked. Then emotional. Then happy. Actually happy. We're having a baby. I started crying. So you're not mad? Mad? He laughed softly. Claire, I love you. For the first time in days, I felt hopeful. That feeling lasted exactly 48 hours. 2 days later my phone exploded with calls. Messages. Voicemails. Something had happened. Something terrible. When I finally got answers, my entire world collapsed. Owen had been arrested. I couldn't even process the words. Arrested? For what? I rushed to the police station. The accusations sounded insane. According to the report, Richard Kensington had claimed Owen had been pursuing me before I turned 18. The allegation was completely false. Every bit of it. We hadn't even met until years later. There was no evidence. No witnesses. Nothing. Yet somehow the case moved forward. I remember sitting across from Owen through thick glass. Neither of us knew what to say. The situation felt unreal. I'll fix this, I promised. But I didn't know how. Over the following weeks, I begged my father to stop. I pleaded. Cried. Argued. Nothing worked. One evening I confronted him in his office. You know he's innocent. My father looked at me coldly. I know what's best for this family. No. Tears rolled down my face. You know exactly what you're doing. For a moment, I thought I saw guilt. Then it disappeared. Pack your things. I froze. What? You heard me. My heart stopped. My mother immediately objected. Richard. No. His voice filled the room. If she chooses him, she can leave with him. Grant stood nearby. Silent. Uncomfortable. But when my father asked whether I was making a mistake, he nodded. Not because he hated me. Not because he was cruel. Because he genuinely believed Owen was manipulating me. That somehow made it hurt even more. Later that night, carrying 2 suitcases and nowhere to go, I walked out of the house where I had spent my entire life. The front door closed behind me. And just like that, I lost my family. At least, that's what I thought at the time. The first night in Owen's apartment felt nothing like the life I had known before. I remember sitting on the edge of a small couch that doubled as a bed, staring at peeling paint on the wall while trying not to cry. The apartment was barely 600 square feet. The kitchen and living room practically shared the same space. The refrigerator made strange noises every few minutes. Outside, traffic from the main road never seemed to stop. For someone who had grown up in a large house with more rooms than people, the adjustment was overwhelming. But Owen never complained. Not once. Even while dealing with his own problems. Even while facing a legal nightmare he didn't deserve. He spent most of his time trying to reassure me. "We'll figure it out." That became his favorite sentence. Whenever bills arrived. Whenever I cried. Whenever life felt impossible. "We'll figure it out." And somehow, hearing him say it made things feel a little less hopeless. A few months later, our daughter Lily was born. The moment I held her for the first time, something changed inside me. The fear didn't disappear. But suddenly there was something bigger than fear. Responsibility. Purpose. Love. The kind of love that makes you willing to sacrifice anything. Money remained a constant problem. Some months we barely made rent. Other months we survived on canned soup and discount groceries. I worked wherever I could. A coffee shop in the mornings. Administrative work in the afternoons. Online customer service at night. There were days I slept only 3 or 4 hours. Days when my entire body ached from exhaustion. But every time Lily smiled, it somehow felt worth it. I still tried reaching out to my family. Birthdays. Christmas. Thanksgiving. Even Mother's Day. Every message was ignored. Every phone call went unanswered. Sometimes I would stare at my phone for several minutes after sending a text. Waiting. Hoping. Nothing ever came. The silence hurt more than any argument ever could. Meanwhile, Owen's legal battle dragged on. Hearing after hearing. Delay after delay. Lawyers. Paperwork. Court dates. It felt endless. Then one afternoon, during a prison visit, something happened. Something that changed the entire direction of my life. I still remember the exact day. Rain tapped softly against the prison windows. The visiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. Lily was asleep in her stroller beside me. Owen looked tired. Older somehow. The stress was beginning to show. For several minutes we talked about normal things. Bills. Work. Lily learning new words. Then his expression became serious. Very serious. "Claire." I immediately knew something was different. "What is it?" He leaned forward slightly. "Your father isn't who you think he is." I blinked. "What does that mean?" For a moment, he looked around the room. Making sure nobody was listening. Then he lowered his voice. "The reason he hates me isn't because I'm poor." My heart started racing. I had wondered about that for years. Even before the arrest. Something about my father's reaction had never made sense. "What are you talking about?" Owen hesitated. As if deciding how much to tell me. Then he said something that sent a chill through my entire body. "I need you to go to storage unit 117 on Oak Street." I stared at him. "What?" "There's a storage box inside." "What kind of box?" "The kind that explains everything." My stomach tightened. For the first time, I saw genuine concern in his eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear for me. Inside that storage box, he explained, were copies of documents he had discovered years earlier while working on one of my father's abandoned office buildings. Documents he had never shown anyone. Documents connected directly to Richard Kensington. The reason my father had panicked when he met him. The reason he had been arrested. The reason I had been thrown out of my home. And as I sat there listening, I realized something that terrified me. My family's destruction hadn't started when I got pregnant. It had started years earlier. The day Owen accidentally uncovered a secret my father would do anything to keep buried. I didn't open the storage box immediately. Honestly, I was scared. For 3 days it sat in the corner of my apartment beside Lily's crib. Every time I looked at it, I heard Owen's words again. The reason your father hates me isn't because I'm poor. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Life was already difficult enough. I was raising a baby. Working multiple jobs. Trying to keep myself together while the man I loved sat behind bars. The last thing I needed was another problem. But curiosity eventually won. Late one Friday night, after Lily had fallen asleep, I carried the box onto our tiny kitchen table. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I took a deep breath. Then opened it. At first, nothing made sense. Folders. Envelopes. Stacks of copied documents. Receipts. Invoices. Bank statements. Pages covered with numbers and signatures. I spent hours sorting through everything. The deeper I looked, the more confused I became. Then patterns started appearing. The same company names. The same account numbers. The same signatures. Again. And again. And again. By 2 a.m, my hands were shaking. Because one name kept appearing throughout the documents. Richard Kensington. My father. I remember sitting there staring at the papers while my coffee grew cold beside me. Part of me wanted to believe there was some mistake. There had to be. This was Richard Kensington. The man who lectured me about honesty. The man who donated money to schools. The man who told me reputation was earned through integrity. Yet the documents told a different story. Fake invoices. Missing company funds. Payments sent to offshore accounts. Money moved through shell companies. Millions of dollars that couldn't be explained. The evidence was everywhere. And suddenly, I understood why Owen had looked so serious in that prison visiting room. The next day, I visited him again. The moment he saw my face, he knew. You opened it. I nodded. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been tormenting me all night. When did you find all this? Owen leaned back in his chair. Years before I met you. Slowly, he explained everything. While working on an abandoned Kensington development office building, he had discovered a hidden compartment behind a damaged wall. Inside were boxes of records. At first, he thought they were forgotten accounting files. Nothing more. But after making copies and reviewing them later, he realized something wasn't right. The numbers didn't match. The transactions made no sense. The money trail led back to one person. Richard Kensington. My father. I stared at him. Why didn't you go to the police? It was the same question I had been asking myself since opening the box. His answer broke my heart. Because by then I had already met you. I felt tears building immediately. Owen looked down at the table. I loved you, Claire. His voice was soft. Honest. Painfully honest. I didn't want to destroy your family. The room felt heavier. I also knew nobody would believe me. He laughed bitterly. A carpenter accusing one of the most respected businessmen in Illinois. He shook his head. I needed more proof. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then another realization hit me. A terrifying one. My father hadn't hated Owen because he was poor. He hadn't hated him because he was dating me. He hated him because he knew. Everything suddenly connected. The strange reaction during dinner. The investigation. The threats. The arrest. The false accusations. The humiliation. The disownment. None of it had been about social status. That had simply been the excuse. The truth was much darker. My father had spent years protecting a secret. And the moment he realized Owen could expose it, he decided to destroy him. As I left the prison that afternoon, rain began falling across the parking lot. I sat inside my car for nearly an hour. Thinking. Crying. Trying to accept what I had learned. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't questioning whether my father was guilty. I was questioning how far he was willing to go to protect himself. And deep down, I already knew the answer. Farther than I had ever imagined. By the time 6 years had passed, Kensington Development was no longer the untouchable company it once was. The cracks had started showing. At first, they were small. A lawsuit here. A failed project there. Then came the audits. Business magazines began asking questions. Former partners quietly walked away. Banks became hesitant. Rumors spread through Oak Ridge faster than anyone could stop them. For the first time in my life, I saw people questioning the Kensington name. My father still acted confident in public. Still attended charity dinners. Still smiled for photographs. But beneath that smile, something was changing. He was nervous. I could see it. Meanwhile, Owen's legal battle continued moving through the system. Slowly. Painfully slowly. But one thing had changed. The documents were no longer sitting inside a storage box. A federal investigation had quietly begun. And every few months, more evidence surfaced. Piece by piece. Transaction by transaction. The truth was getting closer. Then Grant announced his wedding. A massive wedding. The kind people in Oak Ridge would talk about for years. The ceremony was held at one of the most expensive venues in the state. Crystal chandeliers. Luxury floral arrangements. 500 guests. Politicians. Judges. Corporate executives. Local celebrities. News reporters. Everybody who mattered seemed to be there. Everybody except me. I wasn't invited. Not that I expected to be. My family had spent years pretending I didn't exist. Still, when I saw photos of the preparations online, I felt something. Not jealousy. Sadness. Because despite everything, Grant was still my brother. I remembered building treehouses together. Sharing ice cream during summer vacations. Protecting each other from bullies. Somewhere along the way, we had become strangers. 3 days before the wedding, I received a phone call. It was from one of the attorneys working with federal investigators. The investigation was finished. Arrest warrants had been approved. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Everything was ready. The wedding would become the day the truth came out. I barely slept that week. Part of me wanted to stay home. Part of me wanted nothing to do with any of it. But another part of me remembered every night I cried after being thrown out. Every ignored phone call. Every birthday my parents missed. Every court hearing Owen had endured. The truth deserved to be heard. So on the day of the wedding, I got dressed. Not in an expensive designer gown. Just a simple navy blue dress. The kind of dress nobody would remember. And then I drove to the venue. The ballroom was breathtaking. Music echoed through the room. Guests laughed. Champagne flowed. People danced beneath enormous chandeliers. At the center of it all sat Richard Kensington. Smiling. To anyone watching, he looked like a proud father celebrating his son's wedding. For a moment, I almost turned around. Then I remembered Owen sitting behind glass in that prison visiting room. And I kept walking. The second Grant saw me, his expression changed. He immediately approached. "What are you doing here?" Several nearby guests turned to look. "I came to tell the truth." His face hardened. "Security." 2 guards started moving toward me. My mother stood frozen. My father looked furious. The room slowly became quiet. I looked directly at Grant. My voice shook slightly. But I kept going. "You spent years protecting this family from me." The ballroom became silent. 500 people listening. Nobody speaking. Nobody moving. Then I turned toward the head table. Toward my father. The real danger was sitting there all along. A murmur spread through the crowd. Confusion. Shock. Questions. Then the ballroom doors opened. A lawyer entered first. Several people recognized him immediately. Behind him came federal investigators. Then more investigators. Then uniformed agents. The music stopped completely. Guests stepped aside. Boxes filled with documents were wheeled into the room. The atmosphere changed instantly. My father's face lost color. For the first time in years, I saw fear. Real fear. One investigator approached the head table. The room was so quiet I could hear cameras clicking. The lead agent opened a folder. "Richard Kensington." My father slowly stood. "What is this?" The agent didn't answer immediately. Instead, he held up a warrant. Then he spoke. "You are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, financial misconduct, and obstruction of justice." Gasps exploded throughout the ballroom. My mother burst into tears. Grant looked completely stunned. The bride covered her mouth. Reporters rushed forward. People started recording with their phones. My father tried denying everything. He pointed at me. At the lawyers. At the investigators. But it didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records. Offshore transfers. Fraudulent invoices. Hidden accounts. Years of stolen money. Years of lies. Years of corruption. And then, in front of everyone who had spent years admiring him, Richard Kensington was placed in handcuffs. The room stood frozen. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. But I could. Because for years, my father had convinced everyone that Owen was the criminal. Now, for the first time, the real criminal was finally being exposed. The moment the handcuffs clicked around my father's wrists, the ballroom descended into complete chaos. People were shouting. Chairs scraped across the floor. Guests rushed toward the exits while others pushed forward trying to get a closer look. Reporters surrounded the federal agents like a swarm. Camera flashes lit up the room every few seconds. The wedding band had stopped playing long ago. Half-finished meals sat untouched on tables. Champagne glasses stood abandoned. What was supposed to be the happiest day of my brother's life had become the most humiliating day in Kensington family history. I stood frozen. Not because I was surprised. But because after years of waiting, the moment still didn't feel real. For so long, Richard Kensington had seemed untouchable. The man controlled businesses. Politicians respected him. Bankers trusted him. Judges attended his charity events. Growing up, I honestly believed my father could solve any problem. Now I was watching him being escorted through a crowd of shocked wedding guests. And for the first time, nobody was rushing to save him. My mother collapsed into a chair. Her makeup was streaked with tears. People she had known for years were staring at her. Whispering. Avoiding eye contact. The embarrassment was overwhelming. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered all the years she had stood silently while my father destroyed my life. Grant looked even worse. He hadn't moved. Not once. He stood near the head table staring at the ballroom entrance where the agents had disappeared with our father. His new wife, Rachel, stood beside him holding his arm. But even she didn't seem to know what to say. The entire wedding had fallen apart in less than 20 minutes. Guests started leaving. Some quietly. Others discussing the scandal openly. Several reporters approached Grant for comments. He ignored them. Then his eyes found me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hurt between us stretched across years. Years of silence. Years of judgment. Years of believing the worst about each other. Finally, he walked toward me. His face was red with anger. "You did this." There it was. The accusation I knew was coming. I took a slow breath. "No. Don't." His voice cracked. "Don't stand there and pretend this wasn't you." Around us, people continued leaving the ballroom. The celebration was over. Only the wreckage remained. "I didn't do this, Grant." "Then who did?" I stared at him. "The person who stole from his own company." For a second, I thought he might argue. Instead, he looked away. Because somewhere deep down, doubt had already begun creeping in. The next several weeks changed everything. Investigators released more information. Former employees came forward. Bank records surfaced. Witnesses started cooperating. One revelation after another appeared in the news. The story dominated headlines across the state. And then came the detail that finally shattered Grant's remaining loyalty. Evidence showed that my father had personally influenced the case against Owen. Witness statements had been manipulated. False claims had been encouraged. Pressure had been applied behind the scenes. The investigation revealed a deliberate effort to destroy an innocent man. Not because he committed a crime. Because he knew about one. I remember the phone call. Grant asked to meet me. For nearly an hour he sat across from me inside a quiet coffee shop. The same brother who once embarrassed me in that Italian restaurant now looked completely broken. He barely touched his coffee. His eyes stayed fixed on the table. Finally he spoke. "I was wrong." The words were quiet. Painful. Real. I didn't answer immediately. Partly because I wasn't sure what to say. Partly because I had waited years to hear those words. Grant rubbed his face. "I thought I was protecting you." I nodded. "I know. I honestly believed he was using you." The guilt in his voice was impossible to miss. For the first time, he wasn't defending himself. He wasn't defending our father. He was simply facing the truth. And the truth hurt. A lot. Then his voice broke. "I helped ruin your life." That sentence hung between us. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Impossible to ignore. I thought about the years Owen lost. The nights I cried myself to sleep. The birthdays my family missed. The struggles. The loneliness. The damage couldn't be erased. But for the first time, someone inside my family was finally acknowledging it. Grant looked up. His eyes filled with tears. And suddenly the confident older brother who always had answers looked like a little boy who had just realized his hero wasn't who he thought he was. The guilt had finally caught up with him. And no punishment the courts gave our father would ever hurt as much as that realization. The day Owen walked free felt almost unreal. For so many years, our lives had revolved around court dates, legal documents, appeals, delays, and uncertainty that I had forgotten what hope felt like. I remember standing outside the courthouse holding Lily's hand so tightly that she finally laughed and said, "Mom, you're squeezing me." I smiled, but my stomach was in knots. People were gathered outside the building. Reporters. Photographers. Former employees from Kensington Development. Curious strangers who had followed the story for years. The courthouse doors finally opened. And there he was. Owen. For a moment, everything around me disappeared. The noise. The cameras. The crowd. All of it faded away. I saw the same man who had caught my phone all those years ago. The same man who had loved me when I had nothing to offer except myself. The same man my family had tried to destroy. Lily broke free from my hand and ran toward him. "Dad." Owen dropped to his knees. The second she wrapped her arms around him, tears filled his eyes. Mine too. That moment alone made every struggle worth surviving. For several seconds, neither of us could speak. We simply held each other. The years hadn't disappeared. The pain hadn't vanished. But for the first time in a very long time, we were finally standing on the same side of a finished battle. No more prison visits. No more glass barriers. No more lawyers. Just us. The truth had finally won. Over the following months, more pieces of my father's empire continued collapsing. Richard Kensington eventually pleaded guilty. The man who once controlled boardrooms and business deals now faced consequences he could no longer avoid. Kensington Development officially shut down. Buildings were sold. Projects were cancelled. The company that had defined our family for decades disappeared. My mother struggled the most. Not financially. Emotionally. One afternoon she asked to meet me. We sat together quietly for almost an hour before she finally spoke. I knew something wasn't right. Her voice trembled. But I chose not to ask questions. I nodded. Because deep down, I had already known. She wasn't responsible for what happened. But she had looked away. Sometimes silence causes damage too. Grant apologized more times than I can count. Not once. Not twice. Dozens of times. And for the first time since we were children, I believed him. The guilt never fully left him. Maybe it never will. But at least he finally understood. He hadn't protected me. He had protected a lie. As for me, forgiveness came slowly. Much slower than people expected. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It isn't pretending nothing happened. It's deciding that the people who hurt you no longer get to control your future. Eventually, I forgave them. Not because they deserved it. Because I deserved peace. That doesn't mean everything returned to normal. It didn't. Some wounds leave scars. Some relationships never fully recover. And that's okay. Life isn't always about restoring what was broken. Sometimes it's about building something new. Years later, Owen and I sat together on a park bench while Lily played on the swings. She was older now. Confident. Happy. The kind of child I used to dream about raising. The evening sun painted the sky orange. Families laughed nearby. A dog chased a tennis ball across the grass. For once, life felt quiet. Peaceful. Owen leaned back and smiled. "Do you regret any of it?" I looked toward Lily. Then toward him. The man who had survived everything with me. The man who never stopped fighting. I squeezed his hand. No. A smile spread across my face. Because the truth was worth fighting for. And for the first time in years, I truly meant it. Before we go, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you were in my position, would you have forgiven your family? Do you think Grant deserved a second chance? And what would you have done after discovering the truth about Richard? Let me know in the comments below. If this story touched you in any way, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs this reminder. A lie can survive for years, but the truth only needs one moment to change everything. Thank you for spending your time with me today. And don't forget to check out our next story. You never know which lesson might stay with you long after the video ends.